Today is Tuesday, October the 9th, 2012. I'm Matthew T.G.
I'm Heath Mulligan.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to The Technology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is episode 175.
All right, man. We got a great episode planned today. It's just a great week. Clemson won again, beat Georgia Tech.
Hey, okay, if you're going to talk football here, we should give a shout-out to South Carolina.
Clemson is in South Carolina. It was a bad day for the state of Georgia on Saturday.
It was, yeah.
And I think we all hope that Clemson is 10-1 and South Carolina is 11-0.
That would be cool.
When they meet
in November.
In November, ooh, that'd be great.
And just for those that aren't sports fans, Clemson beat Georgia Tech, and Clemson's here in South Carolina, and the University of South Carolina beat Georgia like a drum.
Yeah, and Georgia Tech are both in the state of Georgia.
Yes. Well, I figured they would figure that out.
So, all right, last week we gave away a copy of this book. Paul Tillman, for interacting with show guest Tim Stevens, sent him an email, won a copy. But this week we gave away another copy, and the winner is, first-time winner, it is Howard Walker. And so, Howard, if you'll please send us a message on Facebook or something, we will get your copy of Tim Stevens' Pop Goes to Church. Great book. We'll get to you.
Get it out today if you get us your address. All right. As Heath said, got a good show for you today. A great guest today. We want to welcome Claire Diaz-Ortiz to the show. She leads social innovation at Twitter Incorporated and was named one of the 100 most creative people in business by Fast Company. She's a speaker and author of Twitter for Good and enjoys advising startups and social enterprises. She blogs at ClaireDiazOrtiz.com. Claire, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't believe you guys are on 175 episodes. That's impressive, man. Wow.
Yeah, but you don't want to go back and listen to about the first 160 of those.
Yeah, it'd be kind of embarrassing. Please don't. Claire, it's great to have you. As I read your book, Twitter for Good, I first have to say I was amazed at what I did not know about Twitter and how best to use it. The book really reads like a technician's guide for Twitter. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of your book, talk to us about the evolution of this book. I mean, how it came to me, how you saw a need for the book.
Sure. So I spend a lot of my time on the road essentially trying to teach individuals and organizations how to best use Twitter. And really the book was kind of a natural progression of what I was seeing in all these conferences and workshops that I was giving, whereby from my side, it was very difficult for me to sort of reinvent the wheel every time I talked to a new individual or a new organization. And so I was looking for really a framework to help teach them. And then from their side, I think many times they came away with more questions than I could answer in 45 minutes, essentially. So I think coming up with a framework, which is really what the book is, it's a 5-step model for how to excel on Twitter. Coming up with that was sort of essential for my own sanity, but also I think really helpful to people out there. Even for those, even when I'm not at conferences or speaking at workshops, I would say the number one question I get via email is, how can I best use Twitter? Yeah. And it's easy now to just say, okay, just read this book. And a book might be longer than an article, but you can skim it if you want, read the first chapter or something, you'll get something out of it.
You talked about kind of the framework, and also in the book you present, different case studies, some best practices and tip that can help people and organizations kind of come up with their own Twitter strategy. But this framework that you've kind of come up with is really the heart of the book, is where you kind of use the acrostic TWEET. Can you just kind of take some time and tell our listeners about that framework?
Absolutely. So essentially, I created what is the tweet model, which is probably the lamest acronym in the history of acronyms, but I needed to find one. And so it's TWEET, and that stands for target, write, engage, explore, and track. And I'll kind of go through, what that means. Essentially, this is a model that, as I said, can work for an individual, an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. And it's all about finding a way so that you don't just get on Twitter and 2 months later forget why you're there. So to start, the first step in this 5-step model is target. And that's really coming up with a goal. And one of the problems I see a lot with organizations, whether for-profit or nonprofit, is that maybe a volunteer or an intern will tell them they have to get on Twitter or they should get on Twitter. Yeah. So they'll do that. They have no idea what they're doing. And then 2 months later, they kind of look up and they say, what was I doing here in the first place? Are we just wasting our time? And so target, this first step of figuring out your goal before you get on, is really essential. And I want to be clear, when I say figuring out your goal before you get on, it's not just for people who have never used the platform. I work with a lot of folks that have been on Twitter for a long time, but really want to relaunch an actual strategy. And that's very much what this model is for also. So target is coming up with a goal. And I say that, the vast majority of the 200 some odd million Twitter accounts out there fall into one of 3 categories. They're either an information account, which is an account that just provides regular information and tries to be, a hub for whatever that niche's content is. There may be a personal account, which is, as you might imagine, someone sharing their personal story or the personal story of an organization from a very personal perspective. And the third type of account is a support account. And typically this is a secondary account. For a blogger, it might be just an RSS feed of latest blog posts. For a big for-profit like Delta Airlines, it might be a customer service account. For a nonprofit, it might be a support account raising money for a fundraiser. But essentially, with this target, you're just trying to figure out what kind of account you want to develop and what your goal is going to be. So that's step 1. Step 2 is write. So we did target, now we're on write. And write is just about getting your message out there. Just one of my favorite books on writing is Bird by Anne Lamott. And, she's really into this idea that you have to make those crappy first drafts first. And the same thing is true on Twitter. I hate watching people get on the platform and then wring their hands for 2 weeks about what their first tweet is going to be. So write is just getting started, getting out there. So that's target and write. Number 3 is engage. And of course, if you're not a celebrity, if you're not the Kanye Wests or Alec Baldwins, the second you get on Twitter, the world isn't going to come to you. You need to go find the world. So engaging is essentially about, getting out there. And I say the first 2 things anyone should do if they're new to the platform is 1, ask a question, or 2, try to help someone, because those are both 2 great ways to immediately engage an audience and try to build a following of folks that you want to chat with. So that's target, write, engage. Number 4 is explore. So once you've tried to begin to build up kind of a small group of folks you can chat with or folks you can learn from, the next step is really trying to take it to the next level and finding people that you think can help your cause, whatever your cause might be. And I say a lot that before Twitter, if you wanted to contact many of the influencers in the world, let's say a celebrity, you might have to drive down to Beverly Hills and you'd find some guy standing on a street corner and he'd sell you some map of celebrity homes for $9.99, and maybe you'd go knocking door to door hoping someone would open, right? Obviously, there are online versions of that in terms of, you could buy a list of celebrity phone numbers, but the point here is that what Twitter did is Twitter gave you the chance to actually be able to contact anyone you want. And of course, when you're contacting big influencers out there, no matter what area they work in or they specialize in, many of them aren't going to respond. But, I can't tell you the number of incredible positive case studies of influencers really responding to people about their business or about their cause. So exploring, one of the key parts of that is going out there and finding people that you think might be able to help you and getting in touch with them. So that's target, write, engage, explore, and finally it's track. And tracking is just absolutely essential. Tracking is making sure that you're going where you thought you were going. Because again, the internet, it's really easy for any of us to fall into the sort of black hole of the internet. I do this thing where I'm sure many other people do as well. Well, I'll get online and I'll have my email, my Twitter, my Facebook, whatever, and I'll just sort of do a loop going back and forth between the two, and maybe it goes on for an hour and I'm not actually accomplishing anything. And the same is true on a larger level of, maybe your Twitter strategy. You want to make sure you're staying on target, whatever your target was, and that you're measuring and making progress. So that's really the 5 steps kind of in a quick nutshell. Essentially it's all about getting a goal, doing some smart things to try to reach that goal, and then measuring to make sure you're reaching whatever your target was, essentially. So, yeah.
Yeah, let me interject here. I would say for our listeners, after reading the book, one of the things you do a great job of in this book is giving examples of everything that you've just given to us. I thought talking about Usher and how he got into Twittering was it was fascinating, and it's a great example of the right. You just jump in there, start doing it, and how he learned on the fly. Also, you give some great examples of people who were able to get influencers. They sought them out, they found them, and they actually got on board with their cause. You've already said it, and maybe you don't have a whole lot more to add. But what are some classic mistakes organizations make with Twitter?
Sure. So I think the worst mistake you can make, and we see this all the time, is a company, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, might get on Twitter and they think of Twitter as just a place for push marketing, right? So they think, okay, how can we push out our message as quickly and effectively as possible? And many times their strategy for doing so is to essentially jam a press release into 140 characters. And this is really kind of a classic no. Twitter is about relationships and about building those relationships. And you want your organization, again, for-profit or nonprofit, to be able to build relationships, because that's what quality marketing is on Twitter, essentially. So I think that is far and away sort of the first and most grievous of errors.
Go ahead, Heath.
A lot of people are maybe not as familiar with Twitter as they are with Facebook. So just real quick, if there's one of our listeners who's maybe like very much on Facebook but hasn't yet taken that step to get into Twitter, what are some differences between those two, and what makes Twitter such a viable part of the social media world?
Sure. So, I mean, the sort of basic classic difference that people say a lot, which I agree with, is that, Facebook is essentially for people you know, and Twitter is for people you don't yet know but want to know. So, Facebook is a closed community of, you getting, creating a community for friends you already know or acquaintances you already know, and it's one-to-one in the sense that if I have to know you in order for you to read my messages, to see what I'm thinking and that kind of thing. In contrast, Twitter is about you finding interesting new people that you don't already know, and reading what they say and learning about what they're doing, and then trying to build a relationship with them, essentially. So it's a big kind of difference.
Now, Claire, let me just ask you real quick, as you're talking about the tweet strategy, what are the tools that you use? You talked about, targeting and tracking. What are the tools that you use and that Twitter provides to allow people to do some of these things?
Sure. So any nonprofit, so Twitter provides analytics to both paying advertisers and any nonprofit. So analytics are a great tool to help you with that. In terms of sort of the measurement and tracking side of things. But really, the bulk of the tools of how you use Twitter well are just kind of the free things on the platform, the free different functionalities, things like, a hashtag and an @reply, a direct message, just sort of the base things that happen when you sign on that allow you to really maximize the efficacy of Twitter. I mean, it's the key kind of to remember here when you're thinking about why Twitter as a platform works so well is that Twitter, from its inception in late 2006, has always been simple, and it remains very simple to this day. The reason it works so well, and the reason that people are able to achieve such great things on it, is simply because people do cool stuff, if that makes sense. It's the users that are creating, this innovative space on the platform, and the Twitter platform allows for it, but the Twitter platform is ultimately quite simple. Yeah.
Now, how would a lot of our listeners are pastors, and so their churches are nonprofits. How would someone who is in charge of a church Twitter account, how would they, I guess, apply to get some of those analytics? What's the process for doing that?
Sure. So any nonprofit can apply to get analytics. We have a website with the application and the contact form. The website is at hope140.org. So you just go there, you can fill out the stuff, and I'll send it along. Obviously, people can just send me an @reply on Twitter as well. I'm just @Claire, Claire. Another thing I just want to mention, because I know you have so many pastors and churches listening, is that one of the things we found with why pastors do so well on Twitter, and I know you've had folks on here before that have talked about sort of, the benefits of social media and that kind of thing, but pastors do well essentially for, the one reason that they are put on this earth to minister to folks. And the challenge of their lives is they don't really have enough time to do that. They don't really have enough time to speak to all the wonderful people that want to talk with them and want kind of a piece of them each and every day. So one of the things that we've really seen from pastors and from my work with churches throughout the U.S. is just, you have a number of ministers just saying that, Twitter helps me be able to connect more with people and to create those basically small touch points with people I want to spend more time with, but I'm unable to handle because of the bandwidth, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I didn't even think of it in those terms. One of my favorite stories in the book is you talk about Luke Renner, I think that's the way you pronounce his name, the founder of Fireside International, and how Twitter was used in the aftermath of the January 12th, 2010 earthquake in Haiti. Take a little bit of time and just talk to our listeners about that, because I think it really shows the power of Twitter.
Absolutely. So Luke Renner is this amazing guy. He's from North America, and I met him when he came to speak we brought him in to speak at Twitter, and then he and I had, became friendly on the platform. And so he was kind to do some interviews with me for my book. And essentially Luke moved to Haiti some years ago with his family and started a nonprofit media company. And right after the earthquake, they saw the need to kind of bump up their efforts with this nonprofit media company. And one of the things they wanted to do was they wanted to create an English language school at one of their centers. And as they were investigating, okay, what English language programming should we use? Should we be using a teacher? Should we be using software? They found out that Rosetta Stone, I guess through their research, was absolutely sort of the best thing for their needs. Unfortunately, for the number of students they had, the number of Rosetta Stone licenses they were going to require was going to cost them $18,000. And as a small nonprofit startup, that was obviously too much for them to handle. So Luke, at the time, was already an avid Twitter user, and he just went on Twitter and he, did that explore step in the tweet model where he went out and looked for Rosetta Stone and essentially sent them a message via Twitter, started a conversation, told them about his needs, and through that Rosetta Stone was able to donate all the software they needed. And I think what's great about this story, from not only is it great, obviously, because a nonprofit was given the resources they wanted by reaching out via Twitter, but sort of the aftermath of the story on Twitter has been great, because you see how I think this is really an effective step for Rosetta Stone to make as well.
Yeah.
Simply because Luke has just gone above and beyond to essentially call out Rosetta Stone and thank them, in the months and years to come for their kind generosity, which is essentially, exactly the type of marketing an organization like Rosetta Stone would have. So it's a really great kind of way that a charitable partnership was able to develop very much on the platform. And obviously there are many stories like that, but this is just kind of a good one.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Rosetta Stone. One thing I love about Twitter, and you said a little bit earlier, is it allows, I'm able to tweet. I mean, I could tweet the president right now if I wanted to, and it allows for those conversations to take place. Who are some companies, nonprofits, churches? Who are some people who are, you would just say, are just getting it right, knocking it out of the park in using Twitter for that interaction?
Sure. So another one of my favorite stories is personal to me. There's an organization called the Global Citizen Year, and Global Citizen Year is kind of like a Peace Corps for 18-year-old high school grads. So they take 18-year-old high school grads in the U.S. and they send them to developing nations for a year to do service work in a nonprofit before college. And I have a 19-year-old foster son who's currently doing their program right now in Ecuador. Now, Global Citizen Year is an organization that started to interest me about 3 years ago. And at that time, their CEO is a woman named Abby Falik, and she got on Twitter, but like many people, thought of it more as a marketing tool. She wasn't quite sure what she'd get out of it, but knew that she was supposed to market the message of Global Citizen Year, her nonprofit. But quickly she realized that actually it could be used to contact influencers. And one of the biggest influencers she was able to contact and develop a relationship with was Nick Kristof, the Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, New York Times journalist, and best-selling author who has a heart for international literacy issues. And so basically she contacted him, just as we've talked about in the show today, via Twitter. They developed a relationship, and through that, he's become a huge endorser of them. You know, there have been multiple articles in the New York Times about their organization.
Right.
One of their fellows has written an article in the Times. I mean, it's just sort of another classic example of how an influencer can really help an organization. And obviously this can happen with individuals as well.
Wow. Wow. Well, take a minute and just, we talked about your book, you talked about some of the strategies, and you've actually kind of come up with an online unconference. So take a minute and tell our listeners about the Twitter for Good unconference online.
Sure. So as a companion to my book, for people who want a way to learn this tweet model without perhaps reading the whole book, I have this online Twitter for Good unconference. It's a series of videos. You get access to the videos by making a donation to my nonprofit, which is Hope Runs, a nonprofit I started in 2005 out in Kenya. It works in AIDS orphanages. I used to live in an orphanage out in Kenya. That's where I met my foster son. So that sort of world is really important to me. In any case, the Twitter for Good unconference, you can access it just at Diaz-Ortiz.com. On the sidebar, there's a big logo that says Twitter for Good unconference right here on the right-hand side. And essentially, it's just a series of online videos that will teach you and walk you through specifically exactly what you need to know as a nonprofit to get started on Twitter and to really excel. And I think it's helped some folks, and hopefully it can help some of you as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, Claire, thanks so much for taking time out to be with us today. I think that, as I said earlier and in an email I sent yesterday, one of the big surprises to me in reading this book is I just didn't really realize the power of Twitter. I think, for a lot of people, they sign up because their friends have it, and someone says, you need to sign up for Twitter. But when I read your book, you begin to see, wow, this is a platform that can really be used for good. And this is particularly for us and what we do here, where we're concerned about technology and theology and all this in between stuff. I mean, this is really the convergence of that, and it can become a great tool for the church. And we thank you. Let our listeners know once again where they can find you.
Sure. So on Twitter, I'm just at Claire. You spell that Claire. And online, my blog is ClaireDiaz-Ortiz.com. And those are two easy places to find me. And thank you guys so much for having me today. It was really great to be here.
All right. Thanks, Claire. Blessings on you.
Hey, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Right back at you. Bye.
Yeah, the unconference, I would really pump that if, for your organization, for your nonprofit organization, for your church, especially if you're a bigger church,
right.
And the strategy there. And really, one of the eye-openers for me is you have different Twitter accounts for different things that you're trying to accomplish within an organization. Yeah. So an organization may have a Twitter account, but the CEO, now to bring that into the church may have a Twitter account, but the pastor also has a Twitter account. And what you're trying to accomplish with these two accounts is different.
Yeah. I mean, there are some churches where, the church has an account, pastor has an account, the youth ministry has an account, and like you said, you have these different accounts for different ministries. I think the problem that we've had is we really haven't had a strategy. Yeah. That's one thing I've tried to work on personally with my blog and with the show, that we're trying to just develop that strategy of getting the best information at the best times. I mean, I've spent the last 2 months trying to research. When's the best time to tweet, and when are people clicking on links? And I think one great thing about the conference, obviously, and by the way, yes, we're giving away a Kindle version of Twitter for Good. It's going to be at the giveaway page here in a little bit, but a great companion to the book is this unconference. I mean, it's over 10 hours of video training. Yeah. And once you make that donation to Hope Runs, you have access. And so it's not like You have to watch it at a certain time. I mean, you have ultimate access. I mean, you could get your church team, everybody who runs a Twitter account at your church.
Oh, I would. I would. No, seriously, because there can be a strategy, a organizational-wide strategy for this. And let me just say, this whole thing about Explore and the tweet model that she gives, the framework there, she has in detail the story of this 18-year-old, and she's just exploring, and all of a sudden there's a columnist from the New York Times who picks up on this and is sympathetic to that cause. Now you've gone from just exploring, trying to find people out there that agree with you. Now there's articles in the New York Times about your organization. It is the leading newspaper in the world.
Right.
And you've got articles in there. And
so
so you really begin to see the power of the platform.
I've been very amazed just how many, I guess you would call celebrities, that I have just kind of tweeted and said, hey, I saw this. And like they've, commented back to me, and I'm just like, what in the world? And you can't, as great as, we all like Facebook, you're not able to really do that on Facebook. I mean, you might interact with a fan page, but it's not the person.
Well, she does a good job there at distinguishing what's the difference between Facebook and Twitter. And great guest, man.
What I was most surprised about, I had no idea about hope140.org.
Yeah,
no idea about that whatsoever. So this is huge.
Yes.
And Golden Grove will be looking into this.
Yes, very much. I did not realize, as you guys know, a lot of people know, I use Hootsuite. I use multiple Twitter accounts, Facebook, and integrates, has the statistics. But for somebody who didn't want to pay for that service, now you're finding out that your church can apply and get those analytics. Because that's the thing is there's so many different ways to use Twitter. But if you're just sending the information out there and you're sending out links to your sermon audio, things like that, and people aren't clicking on it, you know what you are? You're a spammer. You're just kind of. But if you're seeing, okay, they're clicking on this, they're not clicking. I'm just.
Claire will get into that too. Let me just tell you. Here's some of the practical questions that she asks and then answers in the book. Who should write the tweets? Should I send automatic feeds for picture, video, or blog posts to Twitter? If I do send automatic RSS feeds, should I do so on all my social networks or just one? Another question, should I geotag my tweets? Another question, well, she asked that twice. Who should, or I've got it in here twice. She doesn't ask it twice. Who should send my tweets? Can I delete a tweet? So she gets really practical. I mean, at a very basic level in this book. And chapter 7 of the book, you asked who are some people that are getting this right. Chapter 7 of the book are 2 case studies. And so you're going to see the evolution of Twitter, one in 2 different organizations, and one from a CEO's perspective and how that CEO learns how to use Twitter effectively. And you see some of the mistakes that are made. So practical book, highly recommend it. And if you want a free Kindle copy, go to our website, click on the giveaways
I want to go
tab.
back to something that I want to go back to something that Heath said. He said he has multiple Twitter accounts. Claire mentioned that there were 2 million Twitter accounts. About 1.7 million of those are Heath. So be aware of that as you're browsing Twitter.
All right, let's move on to
Download of the Week.
Yay! So our download of the week came about because I had to send a fax. My daughter, Dana, our oldest, needed to send a fax. And get what? And this company wouldn't take a PDF. You had to fax it. And so I don't have a fax machine here at the house, so it sent me scrambling. Well, how can we do this? And so this is just a website we're recommending, and that is faxzero.com. I tried that last night. Now, this is a pay-for site, but you can get, I think, up to 5 faxes free. It's a service you can try out. One of the things that we'd like to do is kind of use this to crowdsource a little bit, you may know of a tool that can be used to send faxes from your computer. I'm on a Mac, so I was looking for something. That was the search that I did, and with this being web-based, it doesn't really matter. You can use a Mac or a PC. If you know something out there, let us know. We would love to find out, because I can't believe it, but there are
still some places that want a fax. How about that?
Unbelievable. And this organization is a huge organization, and I thought, you have got to be kidding me. They won't take an email with the PDF. You have to fax it to them.
So, Heath, at the top of the show, we gave away a book to Paul for doing some behind-the-scenes work for us.
Right.
And so there could even be a reward in here for you if you find just a really great free tool for us to use.
And if you send... Actually, I don't
know. If
you
fax us.
Our church...
if you fax us information to the Technology Show...
Our church has a fax machine, but I don't think we can receive... We don't have a fax number.
Send all your faxes mail them to Heath. They'll send out the faxes.
And here's our phone number, 3049 Theology. Send us a fax about the best fax machine or the fax service that you can find.
Send us a fax that is a picture of a tweet you send to Claire.
No, seriously, this is a good challenge, because the one I found, you can send up to 5 faxes free. After that, you have to start paying. If you can find something that's all free all the time, that's our favorite kind.
Really,
right
there should be some client. It wouldn't be hard at all. I mean, the service, I guess it would be on a server somewhere that they'd have to do that dialing, but there may be even something that integrates with Google Voice that we don't know about. Some sort of plugin,
help us out, man.
And if your church is still utilizing the fax machine daily, may I recommend this book, Pop Goes the Church. Move into the 21st century with us.
Well, I think it's neat how you guys still use the Pony Express over and
I want you to call out the organization. Can you? That would only take a fax.
No. I'm not going to do it. But it's a huge corporation.
Oh, it's a corporation.
And I'm thinking, you have got to be kidding me. You need to get some help over there. What in the world?
Did you tweet that to their customer service?
I didn't do that.
That's
Twitter.
You're right.
Use your Twitter power for good, Tony, and do that.
So you're thinking that a company that only takes fax has a Twitter account?
Perhaps we can create one for them.
Maybe they do. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Time for They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
Why should we have to go to class if we came here to play football? We ain't come to play school. Classes are pointless. Ohio State third-string quarterback Cardale Jones in an October 5th, 2012 tweet. Source, ESPN.
These are supposed to be our representatives. If they're not living the same lives or understanding the lives that the average American is living, how can they really represent our interests? The Daily Ticker's Aaron Task commenting after the Washington Post reported that the median net worth of the current Congress rose 5% during the recession, while it fell 39% for the average American. The wealthiest one-third of lawmakers saw their net worth rise 14%. Source, Yahoo News.
My belief is that if we manage to put the soup kitchen out of business, that will go a long way to addressing the attractiveness in our city that's creating a huge negative impact.
What?
Costa Mesa Mayor Eric Beaver proposing that the city do away with its soup kitchens in order to reduce the homeless population. Shannon Santos, the executive director of Someone Cares Soup Kitchen, extended an invitation to the mayor to, quote, come in and have lunch with me. Source, CBS News.
Everybody has something in the closet, and I reckon the best policy is always to be honest. Then it can't come back to haunt you. I had an abortion at 17. It was the worst thing I ever did. It was the first time I'd had sex, and that was rotten. I'd always thought that it was going to be all violins, and it was just awful. I was 2 months gone when I realized. I went to my mom, and she said, without pausing for a breath, you have to get rid of it, she told me. She told me then where the clinic was, then virtually pushed me off. She was so angry. She said, I'd gotten myself in this mess, and now she had to get me out. Sharon Osbourne, in a recent interview where she talked about a wide range of issues related to her personal and professional life. Source, the Daily Mail. All right, well, let's just start right at the top here. I mean, the tweet there, the young man...
This was not Twitter for good. This is Twitter for bad.
Yeah, I watched the video podcast or the news reel on this on ESPN, and yeah, they have met with Cardell and they've talked to him about Twittering.
And I would not, and a lot of schools, I believe Florida State is one. I know Georgia Tech in the preseason, their players tweeted out a picture of some new helmets for their opening game. It was a new helmet that was like a honeycomb design. They tweeted out the picture, and now Georgia Tech, none of them are allowed to tweet. So.
Some coaches, I mean, this is a question. Some coaches are just banning Twitter. You can't Twitter.
Yes, yeah.
Others are taking. Matter of fact, the coach of Ohio State doesn't want to take that. He feels like that personal expression can be good. It can be good, you know, that players are forming relationships with fans, things of that nature, but that they need to be educated.
Can I just say this? And here's the thing is. I tried to read the tweet as it was written, and Cardell, I would start with English class. That's the one. I know you're trying to get in 140
but it's pointless. We're not here to play school. We're here to play football.
It's called capitalization. It's called punctuation, and you should. I'm sure he knows his X's and O's, but he doesn't know his commas and periods.
The next one here is one that gets all over me. Matter of fact, you know, one of the things that you do, Heath, is throughout the week, you and Matthew send me stories that we could possibly use on the show. And so I had one here that you sent me we were going to use, but when I saw this one, I yanked it for, you know, thought, well, I'll save it for next week. This infuriates me. Yeah. So you go through this downturn in the economy. 39% of all Americans saw their wealth go down. 39%. And the Congress, theirs rose on average of 5%. If you're the wealthiest Congress members, it rose 14%.
And this is a nonpartisan issue.
Right.
This is on both sides of the aisle. There is a great book that tackles this. It's by Peter Schweitzer. It's called Throw Them All Out. And it goes into details about how it literally goes into...
Nothing dramatic. Just get rid of them all.
How some of these people... use their position of power, and it basically is, you know, Martha Stewart went to prison for insider trading. Congress just increased their net worth. I mean, just the number of land deals that go on, the things that people know, the deals they make for family members. It is appalling.
You and I are in. I mean, as part of the church, part of the ethos of the church is that leadership is servant leadership.
Yes.
That we're here to serve. And so you have to ask yourself, in what way does this model servant leadership? Also, I would say this, all three of us have a friend, Paul Brown. He has worked in the news industry all his professional life. Yes. He's a videographer. Has worked for the CBS affiliate here. Now he works for the NBC affiliate. He said to me one time, he said, Tony, you know, over the last 4 decades, I've watched good men and women go to Washington. Mm-hmm. He said, but I'm telling you, something happens.
Yeah.
Something happens, he said, from the trip here to there. And he said, and I don't know what it is. Yeah. I don't know. He said, there's just something about the atmosphere of Washington that he said seems to change people fundamentally. And he doesn't mean it for good.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, this story gets all over me, man.
It is what is the most appalling to me is how many Americans are ignorant of some of this stuff. We are ignorant of so many issues. We are ignorant of...
Okay, let me ask you a question now. Some of that's willful ignorance, but don't you think... I'm going to ask you a question now, get you to respond to a statement. Don't you think some of that is we are so inundated with so much stuff? Sometimes you just can't take it on. You just shut it off because it just becomes overwhelming, and you're tired of hearing about it.
Well, and in today's age, we live in a 24/7 news cycle.
Absolutely.
And so let's just say on Monday a story hits that Congressman X, shady deal, made some profit, looks sketchy, not really sure, may investigate. Within 30 hours, we've moved on to something else. And that story just kind of gets pushed under, the rug. What we have to realize is, and again, it's all about education. We have to realize, and again, this is a nonpartisan issue. The power that the various lobbies hold, money that they are literally putting in politicians' pockets, the money that they are using to influence legislation. I mean, people are just like, I don't know. Okay, let's get a little political here. Okay,
don't you get real political?
All right. I don't want to get us off the rails, but okay.
We're already off the rails.
Just for example, you had the video last week of the Obama phone and this lady talking about how she got a free phone from the government. What a lot of people don't know is the government is buying certain phones and is making that available to lower income people. One of the companies, I can't remember the exact name of the company, one of those companies that got the contract to give those phones, to sell those phones, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars off this deal. They are major contributors to one of the political parties.
Yeah, but this is, unfortunately, this is when I say that we get weary, because my response to that in terms of lobbyists, this is the way it's always been done.
Not in 1776.
Yeah, you know what? I wasn't there in 1776. Listen, we get weary because of nonsense. In the 1990s, the big scandal was the bank. How many? And some of our listeners may remember when congressmen were writing checks and they were bouncing to high heaven. They went. One guy had $100,000 in bad checks, but he wasn't having to pay for those. And when it became public, well, then they made it right. So I think part of this is we get weary about it. All right, listen. So Eric Beaver, our mayor out there in Costa Mesa, has this great idea for cleaning up the city, and that is just shut down the soup kitchens.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Another tweet you should not.
Hopefully.
I thought Miss Santos here was very gracious. She runs one of these soup kitchens. She says, "Listen, I just extend an invitation for the mayor to come down and have a meal with us."
Yeah.
Now he's an outgoing mayor.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to worry about re-election. So I mean, he's just.
So it's all right. So just so we're all on the same page here, the mayor's premise is that the soup kitchen, because the city has soup kitchens, homeless people realize, oh, they have soup kitchens. Let's move there,
right? That's
and
what
we
he's
can
saying.
be homeless there, and we can have food. And he's saying, well, if we shut down the soup kitchens, homeless people won't come here.
Yeah. And there's a nice little anecdotal story of a woman who gets her meals there right now, her and her kids, and she talks about how I don't want this. I've always worked my whole life. Mm-hmm. I've never gotten public assistance, and she says humiliating enough for me to have to come here. Yeah. And then you hear the mayor say, "Well, if we could shut this down, we could clean up the city." And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about cleaning up the city so that, as you said, homeless people won't come here. They're coming for the free food. Let's stop that. They won't be here.
I am very involved with Dot's Kitchen, which is a soup kitchen in Westminster, South Carolina. I drive the van on Monday, pick people up, deliver some meals, and it is the first gentleman I ever picked up is a man who was crippled by a stroke about 30 years ago, and he never left his house. Never left his house until the soup kitchen opened. And so 5 days a week for lunch, this man who was confined physically but also emotionally, spiritually, into his house. He's able to get out of the house. he's able to enjoy a meal. There's so many senior citizens who come, and maybe they could afford food, but it gives them an outlet. It has become such a part of our community. And to think, I mean, if the mayor, oh my goodness, if the mayor of Westminster spoke out and said, well, we're gonna shut down the soup kitchen.
It's not just that he said he was going to shut down the soup kitchen. He said this is a way for us to clean up the city.
Yeah.
I mean, as if the homeless are just trash that we need to sweep off the streets.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it doesn't create problematic situations. I don't know. I don't live there.
Right.
But I don't think the way to handle that is to act like people are trash. Remember, part of what drives us is this bedrock belief that men and women are made in the image of God, and that every time we encounter a human being, we encounter the imago Dei, the image of God. And so we are responsible in the way that we respond to others who are the bearers of the imago Dei.
Right.
So, I mean, it's foolishness. Oh, see, I shouldn't have said that. The Bible has a warning about calling people fools. He shouldn't have said it. There we go.
He should not have said it.
Why, for you make yourself out to be a fool?
All right, last story here. I will have to admit to you that I found this article in the Daily Beast fascinating by Sharon Osbourne, and I never watched the Osbournes show.
No, really?
I'm serious. And so I just always saw that as fluff and stuff, and I know that she has some kind of, she's on 2 or 3 shows now. I don't watch her, okay?
Yeah.
I don't. So please.
But you are now.
No.
Oh.
I'm not. But can I tell you that there's some substance to this article? I mean, this is a person who seems to take life's experiences and learn some things from them.
Kind of makes you want to have a personal conversation, doesn't it? To just
it does.
To go a little deeper.
Yeah.
Off
She
the
regrets.
record.
She regrets this abortion. And here's the thing: I thought, sometimes the church has to be careful because, I mean, you and I are part of a denomination, and many evangelicals who are against abortion, and we affirm that.
Yeah.
But if we're so we have to be careful that we're not condemnational to the point where we throw people away, because look at the situation that she was in as a 17-year-old. She tells her mom she's pregnant, and her mom says, all right, you're going to have an abortion.
Yeah.
You made a mess for yourself. Now you've left it for me to clean up.
Yeah.
And she talks about her sense of abandonment, alone. She also had 2 miscarriages after, when she tried to start having children because of the procedure, and it was a direct result of the procedure, something that was damaged. She had miscarriages, and she talked about the pain that this experience had brought to her in her life, and well worth the read.
Marcy makes a great comment in the chat room. She says, I've always actually liked Sharon Osbourne, but I wonder what she sees in Ozzy. I mean, now that is an interesting question for such a smart person.
We've asked the same question, but we always relate that to Karen and Heath. So
I was going to say to Marcy and Larry. Okay.
Poor Larry, man, taking it on the chin.
This is, the Osbournes for probably 5 or 6 years were such a fixture of our culture. I mean, they had one of the highest rated shows.
Really? No, you're serious now, right?
Yeah, I mean, their show was very
I
highly
never watched
rated.
it, so I didn't.
And I mean, they talked about their kids and just the number of, kept the censors in business. Beep beep. I mean, because there's some shows you had 45 minutes of beep and then 15 minutes of actual talking. But I think even in that it's like you said, man, the church is so quick to condemn people and to look at people, and if we would just take the time and at least be open to hearing their story.
I was just going to say that sometimes in our rush to judgment, we don't listen to people's stories. And I felt compassion for her as she told this story, and my heart, I grieved for her. I grieved for that 17-year-old girl who was backed in a corner, and she had no options.
Right. And sometimes we're scared to have these conversations, whatever the issue is, because I think we're afraid that, man, at the end of this conversation, we're going to disagree. and we're going to be on. And so there's no need to. I'm not going to be able to convince them to. And I think for the Christian, we're not called. The presidential debates last week, and that's not what we're called to do. I think Christians should be able to debate and defend our faith, and to be able to do that in love, and to be able to have a conversation with somebody, to walk them through the emotions. I mean, what if she'd had somebody when she was 17 or 18 years old after this happened to walk her through those emotions, and to affirm her that she is still, even though she's made this terrible choice, and that God still viewed her as a beautiful creation, and God still had a plan for her, and God still wanted to do something with her life.
What were you going to say?
Just affirming what he's saying. It's not about I think we've gotten in that mode, thinking that as believers we have to win.
Right.
That's the goal of conversation. That's the goal of the interactions that we'll have with people, is that we've got to come out as the clear winners on stuff, and that's probably not true. It's more relationship. It's more understanding somebody at a deep level and interacting with them beautifully. And I think, Heath, you put that well.
Yeah, and this goes back to Rachel Held Evans last week. She said her realization that I've been given all the answers to questions people are no longer asking. And when you read this story with Sharon Osbourne, what you desperately want is to see someone walk into her life at that moment. To say, there is another option here. I care about your condition. I can help you. I mean, obviously, whoever she had sex with didn't even care about.
Or not. Yeah. We don't even know.
It was simply just an act.
I think a couple of things. We're not called to win debates. We're called to win people. We're called to make disciples. I think what's great about this quote from Sharon Osbourne is she basically says, first time I had sex, boy, how terrible it was, and that it wasn't anything.
It was awful
about how it wasn't.
No violins.
No
violins. Violins playing.
And I think, I think for her to say that in the context of who she is, and that you would put her in that rock and roll category. Being Ozzy Osbourne's wife, for her to come out and say that, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement of.
Again, we put the link up there. Recommend that you read that story. All right, let's tell you a little bit what's coming up in the weeks to come. Next week, in studio, Dan and Joy Irvin. And this will be the first time we've had guests in the new studio.
It will be. The first time we have guests, so it'll be interesting.
They'll be blindfolded and led to the to the road. And
Dan and Joy Irvin, they are the directors for the Caribbean Atlantic for the Wesleyan Church.
Global partners, right, for the Wesleyan Church.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. In the Caribbean Atlantic, one of the things that we'll talk a lot about next week is Haiti. That falls under their care, and
we've already got some stories lined up. We've already got two that we've been talking about ahead of time that will be. Dan, you're going to love listening to Dan, and I don't know if we're planning on doing They Said It and stuff like that, because when he's in here, we'll be able to just talk about everything for a long time.
Yeah, and we may want to take the whole hour and just spend that with
or
Dan.
Incorporate our Haiti stories into the They Said It and bounce them off of him, because it'll be that way, I'm pretty sure.
October the 23rd, Dr. Timothy Tennant, president of Asbury Theological Seminary, will join us, and then the last guest for the month is October the 30th. I already said that. Excuse me. Timothy Tennant is October 23rd. October 30th, Dr. James Emery White. Word salad, man, that was really good, wasn't it? He wrote a book, What They Didn't Teach You in Seminary, and
great book.
Yeah, and the guy, obviously, it's not a rant against education. His whole life is a testimony to the power of education.
Yeah.
But
it's just very practical stuff. Saying, when your feet are there on the ground, things aren't always as great as people may have led you to believe they would be.
It's way easier. It's way easier pastoring from an academic office at
yes,
the college. All right, and so our giveaway of the week for this week, Heath.
We're going to be giving away a Kindle version of Twitter for Good by Claire Diaz-Ortiz. And you can go to thetechnologyshow.com/giveaway here in just a bit.
Yeah, it'll be later on this evening. We've got a funeral to get to, so this episode won't be produced and put together till later tonight, but it'll be there.
But we'll make sure to tweet it out, so that'll be Twitter for Good to win Twitter for Good.
All right. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the story we covered at our website, thetechnologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, and please do, send your emails to thetechnologyshow@gmail.com. Better yet, leave us a voicemail by calling us at 3049-TEOLOGY. That's 304-986-5649. Leave us a message. We may even play those comments on the air. Real quick, Heath, where can our listeners find you on the intranet? It's internet. I know it's internet. I always kid around by saying intranet, and someone got me last week on that.
On the Iranian intranet. Yes.
They can...
Wait, real quick. Yeah. Iran is building their own internet, and we said after the show, that's a true intranet.
So, where can people find you on the Iranian internet?
Sorry, go ahead.
I've totally lost my train of thought. They can find me at heathmullican.com, at heathmullican everywhere. I want to give a quick shout out to Paul Tillman, friend of the show, won the contest last week, launching a new blog, ingodsway.org. Ingodsway.org.
MatthewTG.com for me and Tony.
At AKC64. Twitter at AKC64. All right. Again, thank you.
Tony's a tweeter now.
Yeah, I am. I'm working on it. I read the book. I've got to try to learn here. As always, thanks for joining us, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Adios.